Elyse, Crystal, Monica, thanks for coming. Um, I wanted to start this episode off with, saying that this is already a very humbling experience. I think that once people, read who's in the episode and then start searching on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatnot, they'll see the awards, founders of companies, entrepreneurs, um, you know, people that are supporting local businesses, small businesses, and also what I think part of hopefully what we talk about is also women who have banded together to empower each other and to also share their experiences and want to support in a way where everybody wins. And I think that's really special. I think it's something worth celebrating, but it's also something that I want to discover and get to know more about because, I just hear the title Work Wives and I'm like, I don't know much about it. I'm sure that if I apply, I'll get rejected. I'm sure the criteria must be no guys with tattoos. But kind of where I wanted to start off with all that being said is something that I stumbled upon recently that kind of stood out to me, and I think it's something that I want to throw to you is that there's this saying that goes that there's really only two people that you should really focus on making sure that they're proud of the person you are, and it's the 10-year-old self that believed that you were going to become something, and then the 80-year-old self that looks back and is proud of all the things that you've done. And I'm wondering, where do you think you stand in
Oh my
looking
God.
at those two people right now?
I can start off by saying I actually have a photo of like a 6 or 7 year old Crystal framed on my desk, and it's me on a beach in Florida running with seagulls. And I have another little one of me framed, and I'm, pretending to be a pirate. But I look at those photos every day because that is literally one of my moral compasses is would little Crystal be proud of what I'm doing? And if I went back in time and told her what I'm doing today,
Yep.
would I blow her mind? And if it's not a hell yes, then I need to rethink it. So definitely something I think about all the time. I don't think about the 80-year-old Crystal yet,
Okay.
but definitely the little Crystal.
I love that. There's a trend on social media right now. Have you girls seen it?
Yeah.
It's like a reel, and then
I
you
met my
say,
younger
yeah,
self
for
for
coffee. I was
Yeah.
like, I feel like this is
Yeah.
relatable to that.
Yeah.
It's so cute. I love it. And it's powerful too, right?
Yeah.
So you go back to your younger self. I have not done my older self yet, but I've done my younger self too.
Yeah, I think it's not something I used to think about, but recently, so I never thought I would do what I'm doing now
Right.
as a little girl,
Yeah.
but I was always like, I looked up to specific women as a little kid, and one woman, my second grade teacher made us pick a woman and write an essay on her, and like 10-year-old me wrote an essay on Hillary Clinton. And then in the fall, I was mentioned in the acknowledgments of her last book that she wrote. And when I got that book, I was just like, wow.
You manifested that.
Well, I don't know about that, but like, I got super emotional because I was like, never in a million years would I have
Right.
thought that the person I wrote an essay about when I was 10 years old, like now is my client. And it's, you don't really think about it until those moments happen where you do like think of your younger self and are like, this is
And I
what-
relate really to something like that because for me, like when I grew up, a big part of my life was snowboarding. And I remember a couple of years ago sitting on the chairlift on my first trip that like I paid for. I was on a mountain that I wanted to be at, doing the thing that I love, looking back and being like, if that kid was right beside me right now, would be like, you fucking did it. Like, this is so awesome.
Those
right?
moments are awesome. But like you don't think about them until they happen.
No,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes we gloss over them and think like, they're not that, they're just part of life, but you have to remember there was someone that was wishing that you were gonna that you were gonna do that.
I feel like we've all been there before where we've been business travel, staying in a hotel, and we took something from the minibar. Because I remember when I was a kid, it was
you
like
were not
if you
allowed.
opened something out of the minibar, it was going to bankrupt your entire family. And now I still remember the first time I was on a business trip where I was my own boss and it was on my company credit card. And I'm like, you know what? I'm taking something out of the mini fridge. And to your point about paying for the lift pass and
Yeah,
all of that,
yeah.
those little moments, while they're just a blip in time, actually are such a huge milestone of where we've come from, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to stop and recognize those small
Yes.
moments, because for me it's the room service, but very
Yes,
similar to like the
also
minibar when you're
room service.
traveling. But if you don't stop and appreciate those moments, I feel like we're constantly in this hustle to just like keep reaching that next goal, because we're all ambitious here and we definitely have big goals to reach. So it's important to stop sometimes.
That's true. So true.
So we obviously glossed over the little part. I want to know, what is Work Wives? Like, I think that's really, and you're the founder, right?
Yes, yes. So I built Work Wives. This has been a dream of mine for years and years and years. I used to live in Ottawa for 10 years. Moved back here around 2-3 years ago, and when coming back to Moncton, I just felt like I didn't have the support in the community that I used to have in Ottawa. And I knew there were some badass women here in Moncton and across the country as well, in rural areas or cities that don't have resources. So I decided to create an online community. So it is the fastest growing digital platform for specifically Canadian businesswomen. So now more than ever, it is so important that we have that space, because we're coming together as Canadian founders, female founders, to support each other, specifically through like the tariff trade war that's going on right now, or finding new distribution or suppliers, coming together to share all of our successes, but also our challenges, and help each other along the way. So it's all digital. We have monthly events and speakers inside the community. We have a book club, and then this master directory inside. And we actually just had our first in-person event last week in Moncton. So Moncton kind of kicked off our tour for the year. We're going to stop in different cities throughout Canada. And we had we were 20 in the room. It was a very intimate, like it was invite only. And we had a great Valentine's Day brunch. And I think, Crystal, you were like one of the top first people to join Work Wives right away. And then Elyse, you weren't far behind. So it's fun.
Amazing. So what, I guess, you've spoken a lot about what it constitutes. What were the things that, I guess, for both of you in your experiences before that you were searching for, or were there pieces missing of kind of the entrepreneurial puzzle? What was the tipping point and what came out of it?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I guess, so before I joined Work Wives, I had been an entrepreneur for a few years, and my first company, I had business partners who were also women. So I had that kind of like partnership and like other women who were going through the same thing as me. But it is pretty, it is sometimes lonely. You're your own boss, you have employees, you don't always have like peers within your company. So it's not like a typical workplace where you make friends at work and like you have other people to turn to, ask questions. So I was kind of craving that kind of just other women who were building companies and going through the same challenges as me, and or maybe had already gone through the challenges I'm going through now, and I can seek their advice. So when Work Wives started like kind of teasing on Instagram like this is coming, I was like, oh, this is very intriguing, and sign me up. It's been awesome so far.
I would second that. I've been an entrepreneur. It's actually going to be 8 years next week. And I don't have a team. I built my company. I came out of the agency world. When I started my company, I wanted it to just be me and my clients. There's no smoke and mirrors. They see what they get, and it's all working with me. But because of that, I don't have a team. I don't have any, employees that I can talk to at the end of the day to say, here's what's going on. So it can be a lonely road to be an entrepreneur. So when Monica started talking about this, I already loved everything she was doing. So, I mean, I didn't even have to know what Work Wives was. And I was like, sign me up, it's Monica. But once I got into the platform, it's so great because we talk about celebrating those small wins, just the little thing like every Wednesday, it's Wins Wednesday, and they prompt you to share something you're proud of that's happened that week, or a milestone you've hit, or something that's happened for one of your clients. It's just a great place to go and talk to like-minded women who are on the same journey as you, and to help them. If maybe there's somewhere where you were 5 years ago and you can offer advice, but there's someone that's, where you want to go and they can offer advice, and it's really, really valuable.
And I also think like you're always starting out again in business, right? So whether you're just starting out and then you hit your next milestone, you're starting out at that milestone again, whether it's that 5-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure. So like it's so at work. You both touched about how lonely it is, but it is extremely lonely to be an entrepreneur. So like to have that support has just been like such an aha moment for me. I'll speak to me personally, but also like inside the community, we're seeing already a lot of like collaborations being formed or partnerships or referrals. So it's getting them business, yes, but at the end of the day, it's not to get business. It's really to get the support and the community behind it.
Right, right. Now, would you say your journey to starting this kind of started in the same way where you also felt loneliness?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I started, so I've been in business for almost 6 years now, but kind of have always been an entrepreneur my entire life, but officially on my own for 6 years. And I started out as a solopreneur. So I was this one woman band girl, kind of going business to business, getting the deals done. And then my team grew from there. But I was still the only founder. So I couldn't talk about hiring and firing and kind of scaling and growing the same way that I did with my team. So I was definitely looking for those conversations. I tried so many organizations and business groups and just couldn't find it. So I was like, heck, I'm going to start it myself because I'm definitely not the only one out there.
Right, right. And I mean, like, is that, and I spoke to all of you a little bit about this before and very briefly, like I've never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think I've said this so many times, even with other people that have come on, and then I hear their stories and they share their experiences. And I think that while a lot of people start off in entrepreneurship for all of the right reasons, they also discover all of the things that they need to be responsible for. But what I've seen that's very common is they have a passion for a specific thing. Would you say your experience is the same? And what would you say, like, in each of your individual experiences, what was that driver, I guess? What was that thing that really kept you going through maybe having to be the dry cleaner or the janitor or the doing the door to door or the phone calls? Like, for me, the part that I hate the most in everything that I do is making a phone call. Right. And it's like, I'd rather send an email, but making a phone call, I'm like, but you have to do it, right? And I have I guess, well, I should still be doing my phone calls, but sometimes I have the capabilities of delegating, but in the entrepreneurial world, especially starting off, you're kind of looking at the mirror and kind of looking back yourself. But so kind of share with me what you would say that driver was that really pushed you and made you want to be an entrepreneur.
I can start. I didn't know otherwise. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so like this is the only lifestyle I knew of. So it wasn't a matter of when, it was a matter of what for me. So I studied marketing, started out my career in marketing, worked at big firms in Ottawa. I was in-house with the NHL as well, kind of worked with those big brands. And then I felt ready enough, not 100%. I think if I would have known what was coming next, I wouldn't have had taken the plunge so quickly, but kind of went in blind, and then you just figure it out every single day. And we're still figuring it out. Like we don't have everything together.
I think for me, I was tired of making other people's dreams come true.
Right.
A year before I started my PR company, I launched East Coast Mermaid, which is a travel brand, and now it's become its own media site. And I did that just because I wanted something that was my own, and I wanted something that I could put my passions into. A lot of people don't know this. I went to university to be a marine biologist. I've been by the ocean my entire life. That's something I absolutely love. So starting to tell stories about New Brunswick and the pride of living here, that just was natural because I've always been a storyteller. A year later, when I started my PR company, that love of storytelling, that was the other driver. It was following my own dreams, but then also telling stories for a living. So through PR, I'm able to help small businesses, women entrepreneurs, brands share their story and help them make waves. And that's whenever I have those days where I'm like, I don't want to make this phone call or I don't want to have this tough conversation, I remind myself that everything I get to do is exactly what that little crystal we talked about earlier could have never in her wildest dreams thought was possible, because the internet capabilities back in the 80s weren't, we didn't know that these dream jobs could exist. So yeah, I'd say making my own dreams come true and just being able to tell stories and help others do the same.
Yeah, and for me, I work like my niche, I do marketing and social media, but my niche is really political organizations and campaigns and politicians. And so some days are really tough, but I think for me, what drives me is I work on projects that I really care about. I work for causes that I really care about and believe in. And yeah, those tough days are so worth it when you then can help, you know, a really great candidate win an election, or like help an advocacy organization like just get more people to know about what they're working towards. So yeah, it's that end goal of like all the work that you're doing will actually have an impact, and because you own the company and it's you, and like you really see the impact that you're making very directly. So yeah, that's what drives me.
Do you feel as though like, so, you know, I'm sitting in front of three people that are directly doing marketing, you know, on many scales, and I think that you know, there's many things that you can market. There's different channels. Are there specific areas that you feel that you navigate? Like you've obviously mentioned with the political stuff, and I kind of will get to that point after. But are there parts maybe in your journeys where you've been like, when I think of marketing and what really made me want to continue and pursue that, it was like this part?
I think for me, I mean, I do PR. There's nothing cooler than seeing yourself on TV, seeing your name in a magazine. And so the beauty of what I do is I get to do that for my clients. I do it for myself, and it never gets old.
Okay.
When you get up in the morning and you pour a cup of coffee and you watch your client on the morning show, or you see them in Forbes or the New York Times or whatever that might be, that's just the best feeling in the world. So that's, yeah, I'd say that's one of the best parts for me.
I love that. For us, like short term, obviously when like you spend hours on a reel and it does really well on social media, that's a good day.
That's the best feeling.
But like long term, we very much, so we focus in the health and wellness industry at Posh Media, my marketing agency. And so we work with a lot of 6-figure founders, and then we bring them to the 7-8-figure type of business. So that it has been the biggest reward from my end, is when the ROI is there from a profit and sales standpoint.
Okay, nice. Now, so I find, you know, obviously, and it's going to be really difficult for me going forward never to talk about politics at this point in time in what we're going through in the world.
Get it.
Talk to me about political marketing.
Oh my gosh, it is a wild ride. So I worked in politics before I became an entrepreneur. I did social media for politicians, both in Ottawa and in the US. And it's, you know, like it is marketing, but it's kind of different, especially when you're like, this is a person who pretty much everyone in the world knows, millions of followers, you're working around the clock. You can plan your day and like have a marketing campaign for that day, and then something happens and you have to throw it all away, right? Which happens in any industry in marketing, depending on like what's going on. But yeah, like take for example what's happening right now, and like potential trade war, or like we don't know what's going to happen. So it's a lot of like planning, but then also planning to change everything, right? So yeah, it keeps you on your toes. It also means you need to like just continuously learn, which is marketing in general, right? And like TikTok gets banned. What do we do? You know, I have clients now who are on Blue Sky, so I had to like learn Blue Sky, and that's completely different. Or had to find somebody who can set up a WeChat account, right? Because they have a lot of Chinese speaking audience. So yeah, it's there's never a dull moment.
I mean, I think the thing that strikes me as being the most difficult is when you think about marketing, you're often, you know, it's storytelling, but at the end of the day, like if we're just kind of pulling everything aside, it's like you're really trying to showcase the brand and promote it as either the best or, you know, the least expensive or whatnot. There's always kind of that big value proposition. And I think the only kind of rivalries that you really see on the surface level that may resemble political is like when Wendy's kind of attacks like McDonald's or Burger
Mhm.
King or stuff like that. Um, how difficult must it like? How do you navigate through a sphere like that where it's like, you're constantly having to battle opposing opinions and they always change, or they're always like, I,
Yeah.
I find especially now, and we share the same background, is like I find politics has turned into a sport versus something where it was more like, hey, listen, this is the things that we want to do for the world, and these are our principles and how we want to do it, vote for this. Now it's like, well, they're doing it wrong, and that's all that it is.
Yeah, it's tough to navigate, and I will say, so I've been in this space for since 2015,
Okay.
right? So almost 10 years, which that's a long time. And I will say, like, every year it gets worse and worse and harder.
Mhm.
Like, just the trolls, the like bot farms, like will take over politicians' posts too, and like the comment section is just wild at this point on anybody's posts, right? Um, but yeah, it's tough because sometimes you're putting great stuff out,
Yeah.
and you might believe in the person's policies and you're really trying to educate people about what the policies mean, but what's coming back at you is a completely different level. It's just like negativity. So yeah, it's tough to navigate. It also, I think, has helped me in my entrepreneurial life because like things just roll off me like
Oh, yeah,
water,
that's true.
like water, right?
Yeah.
I've seen just horrible things written. And so now, like, I don't take things personally, which
Yeah.
I feel like entrepreneurs, you kind of need that skill.
Mm-hmm.
You need to make decisions that are tough sometimes, and kind of, yeah, not take things personally. So that's helped me in that aspect.
Is it a world that both of you are also intertwined in, or is it mostly through Elise's experience, or how do you?
Politics?
Yeah.
We don't touch politics. No.
So I don't touch politics, but from a PR perspective, it does impact my clients in some respects.
Right.
So one of my clients in BC, they have an organic skincare company. They export to the US. So there's a lot of stuff going on and conversations being had about what happens if the tariffs happen, if there's a trade war, all of that. So right now that client is getting media interviews that I'm booking for her, talking about how, as a small Indigenous woman-owned business in Canada, they're leaning into the made in Canada.
Right.
So I do need to have a pulse on what's going on. I don't do crisis PR or political PR. If anyone calls me, I'm like, I know the perfect person that you should chat with.
Let me just hop
But
on.
I need to, as a publicist, I have to have a pulse on what's going on, because it's the same thing. I can have an amazing launch planned for a client. If there's breaking news or something happens on Twitter that everybody's talking about, we might need to postpone that announcement because everybody's preoccupied, right? You don't do a PR launch the day after Super Bowl. It's not political, but everybody's talking about Super Bowl. Same thing. I just have to constantly know what's going on, and prep clients that things and timelines might change because of what's going on in the world.
A topic that I've talked a few times before in the podcast, and one that I have a kind of personal opinion on, and a lot of people know it, especially businesses that I've worked with, and it's kind of the rise and fall of traditional media, and I think that if you're probably a great example of someone that I'm sure, and I could be wrong, but I'm sure there are still parts of doing marketing with 6 or 7 or 8 figure businesses that still revolve around traditional marketing. But um, in all honesty, is it dead now? Like,
No, it's not. Wait, what's your stance? Are you for or against?
I'm very like, so I think that there is less opportunity for businesses that have limited budget to do it on a traditional scale, or in traditional media. And I think often they fall in the personal belief that marketing doesn't work because of it. And I've not been involved in businesses at your scale, but I think that the the everyday business owner that wants to do a little bit of marketing or wants to hire one person, or like my personal journey is like the trying to fight to just have a job in marketing with local businesses, and it's been like door closed, or we'll do these responsibilities at the same time and stuff like that. So that's why my personal belief is that
Okay.
you can do it through the digital more in those scenarios, and I think they should help marketing be more accredited and more accepted in those specific circumstances. Do I think traditional media is dead? I think that it's rather stupid if you don't have the budget for it. But I'd love to know all
So
of your
many
thoughts on
thoughts.
this.
Yeah, so many
no,
thoughts.
no.
Okay, I'll start to your point. Like, if you're a small business,
Yeah.
like, absolutely, you will want to go all in on digital because you can measure your ROI.
Yeah.
And a lot of our small business clients, like, every dollar needs to be accounted for,
Right.
and we don't have budget for, like, I don't want to say fun, but like to kind of experiment with and kind of play a bit more and be a bit more risky. So everything needs to be very strategic and calculated. So for a small business, digital and social is absolutely the way to go. PR is another great opportunity to get exposure to press at you're not paying for your placement, but you're getting access to the media that way. But companies that have large budgets, I will always be a fighter and a believer for traditional, because we're so glued to our phone that we're constantly bombarded by all these messages that if you actually look up, if you're like walking in a city, like you still spot that billboard, you still see that bus shelter coverage when you're dead stop in the traffic. So I think they still work, but they're very expensive, specifically if it's print or broadcast. But it all comes down to budget at the end of the day. But I still believe that it does work.
I agree. I mean, traditional PR media, whether it's newspapers, TV, radio, that still works. Those media outlets are still active. When you talk about having an ROI on everything, it's a lot harder to track with PR. If there's a PR company that says, I can tell you exactly what that placement was worth, they're lying because they can't. You don't know that there's a woman who's pouring her coffee in her kitchen and the morning show's on in the background and she heard a snippet of your name, your company name being mentioned, that 2 weeks later when she hears that company come up in conversation, she's not going to be like, oh yeah, I know that company, and maybe not even remember where she heard it from. So for that reason, it's really hard to track, but it's brag worthy. So when you have a company website, I like to call it the credibility storefront, but where you have all of those media logos that as seen in, if I'm discovering a company for the first time through digital, so I hear about it on Instagram or wherever, and then I go to their website, if I don't see that they've been covered in an outlet that I recognize, I'm going to wonder if that whole website is just one big scam, if the company even exists, if I order from them, if it's actually going to show up. But if I see that they've been covered in all of these media publications or on CTV News or the Globe and Mail, I'm immediately going to know they're legit. And that's the beauty of traditional PR and traditional media.
I won't buy from a company that I don't know if I don't see the as seen in bar.
Also true.
And I always use the example, years ago, I worked with a super cool surf retreat startup out of Halifax. So they would organize these entrepreneur retreats in Peru. You could go for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months. Everything was arranged for you. You'd get an apartment, surf lessons. You could surf all day. You had this co-working space, cooking classes, Spanish lessons, the whole works. The first year that they launched, they had never done it before. They didn't have a single testimonial or anything. They hired me. I helped get the word out there. They landed in GQ. So GQ did an article about, really cool fitness vacations to plan for that winter. The minute that article went up, they started getting applications from around the world. They had applicants from Europe, and people started booking. And they had absolutely no proof in the pudding that this whole thing, like these people could have booked and showed up in Peru and no one would have even been at the airport. But they had been in articles that had been vetted. We had sold it. We showed them pictures and everything. And that really helped them grow their first year of business. So it does work.
And it really depends on who your audience is,
Right.
right? Like there are so many audience segments that do pay attention to, they read GQ or they get the New York Times every Sunday and they read that, or, the Times and transcript, so, or look at the billboards on the way to Shediac. So yeah, it's all about identifying who your audience is and what they pay attention to and making sure you're present there. And it is about having different touch points, right? Because it takes, I think it's like, it takes 32 times for somebody to hear something and actually retain it. So like the more touch points you can have with someone in as many different places as possible, the better. But again, like if you have the budget for it. So.
And I will say I've been proven wrong on this specific thing where it just happened recently. And with our design center, we have an exclusive segment of home hardware that's called Beaver Homes and Cottages. And it's kind of this all-in-one design, build, and have your materials delivered to your site for the contractor. So it's like one-stop shop kind of setup, right? And we're promoting this through digital, and it's doing, you know, it's doing what it's set out to be through digital. And then they send a flyer out and we get like non-stop calls, and I'm like, and it's just like a 2-pager. Now there, I'll tell you the pros and cons of that after in my opinion, but I was so like, oh, maybe I'm like really like too biased about this when you see the results of that, and you're like, it's probably the right audience segment, the messaging's probably on point, it's probably going in rural communities, that they are the people that, you know, it's probably also going in you know, the metropolitans and all that. But I'm sure if you look at, you know, you'd have a camera through your phone and you see the person on the other side, it's like it checks all the boxes of the things that your digital is probably not doing. The only other part that I guess I don't like about it is that if you do it successfully, it works. If you don't do it successfully, it causes a lot of trouble, and it takes so much time to do, and then it's that's what it is. Like, you screw up spelling on a billboard, it's there. It's there for the month, right? So I guess that also plays a little bit in, you know, I maybe had that little, oh shit, and a kind of foot in mouth moment. But also I think there's, just in that experience, there's like it does this wrong, or and that's where I guess my experience kind of.
I will say we don't do a ton of traditional anymore. Like before the pandemic, budgets used to be like, I want to say like 60% digital, 40% traditional.
Okay.
We did a lot of billboards, a lot of broadcast radio ads. We did the jingles, we did all the things. But now it's like 100% digital for most brands.
Okay.
So you're not too far off when you say that, but mailers are extremely beneficial if you do targeted geos around them, but they're very costly to print.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
I was going to say though, on the flip side, on traditional media, I have 2 clients right now that their be-all, end-all goal is to get into trade publications. You know, those old magazines, you'd go to a doctor's office or any office and you'd see these trade publications printed on a coffee table. For 2 of them, that's their big goal right now, is I want to be in those publications. So there are still companies out there that see the value in getting those opportunities, which, so it's like you said, you have to know who your audience is and who they're trying to speak to and what platforms that audience are hanging out on. And for a lot of them, they are still getting those magazines. I mean, I still get Atlantic Business Magazine print copy in the mail. I love going through it and seeing what Atlantic Canadian companies are doing. So I wouldn't say it's dead by any stretch.
And it depends who your audience is, as you both said, because a B2B business, like you won't necessarily target, a general contracting company. You won't target the owner on Instagram. You can't put a reel in for them to see you. So you need to find where are they, and those trade magazines are a great example of they still read them. Like they still have them on their desk and they still read them.
And what matters to that person in your audience. Like I worked with a law firm, a local law firm here, and I mean, you see so many billboards for lawyers, right? And someone I knew was looking for a lawyer, and I referred this law firm to her, and she was like, oh no, I'm gonna go with this other one because I see his billboard, you know, on the highway. And so that was a determining factor. Like, which one do I choose? The one with the billboard, I probably trust more than the one that I don't see regularly. So in certain industries, like the legal industry, billboards are huge. And then not just here, like, you know, you're driving through Vegas and you see a lot of legal billboards that are like probably multi-millions of dollars to have them there. And they pay that much because it works for them. So
Yeah, there's like, I think there's also in some situations where the traditional is probably the best angle because it's one of those like it's not there because it's going to be the impulse to I'm not going to call an injury lawyer unless I have an injury, but if it's there and you see it so many times and there's a good there's something that translates into the other channels, like when that happens it's the only person you remember, right? So
Yeah, if
yeah,
it's a good billboard.
if it's a
It's
good
like a
billboard.
memorable billboard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, all that being said, I still think digital is great. And
Yeah.
like the ROI is there, like you can measure, you can really pinpoint who you're targeting. And like if you have a limited amount of money to spend and you know who your audience is, I think digital should be your number one stop.
You can
for
have
small-
success on digital with a small budget
Yeah.
and a large budget.
Yeah.
So it's really like the easiest entry point for any new entrepreneur.
What would you say, like for a small business just starting off, like what are some of the things that maybe in your experience you've seen that have worked, or also in your earlier days, maybe there were things that you learned the hard way that you're like, if I could tell someone right now, this is a free piece of advice and maybe it'll translate into a lead or whatnot. What would be those things that, maybe that small business owner may be watching? It could be a contractor, it could be a real estate, a kid that's just coming out of university and has gone into real estate, but they have to do their own marketing and stuff like that. What are some of the things that pop up?
I can talk from like a founder's perspective instead of a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
I wish I would have outsourced earlier. I can do everything. I know I can do everything, but is it the best use of my time? No. And I did everything for too long, and it kind of stopped me from growing quicker. Whereas now I definitely have a team, delegate most of the inquiries coming in, but in the early days I didn't. So I wish I would have trusted myself to delegate instead of just doing everything on my own.
How does and you've all started from solopreneur journeys or stayed in it, or how do you take that risk of scaling? Like how does do you have to
I mean, sometimes at a certain point you have no choice but to scale.
Yeah.
Like at least I found myself like working all the time and almost to the point of burnout, and you kind of realize, okay, I need to like hire, or I need to outsource, I need to like level this up because otherwise I can't keep growing at this pace. So that was like my realization.
There's only so many hours in a day, and you can't do it all.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's funny you talking about switching to founder marketer. I think for me, building a media brand through East Coast Mermaid, it was realizing I don't have to be on every platform. It's really that knowing your audience. Because I write about seafood and coastal travel and coastal living, sea glass, I have a larger audience that's 65 and over. Believe it or not, they're all hanging out on Facebook.
Yeah.
I posted a photo last year of my father and I cooking smelts, and it had over 1 million hits and views because it was all people from across North America that were like, I remember cooking smelts with my dad growing up, or my grandfather, or going ice fishing. It created this nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
So I know that regardless of what I do, I need to go all in on Facebook because that's where that audience is. But I also know I need to be on Instagram because my younger audience is there. But in the early days, I tried to be everywhere, and I had tried to make sure I had content for everything and that I was diversifying content.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back now and say, go all in on the channels that are the most valuable for you and grow those instead of trying to be everywhere, because again, you only have so many hours in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because on the nostalgia part, I don't know if you see it on TikTok, there's like this, I get them a lot, but it's like you wake up in when the Black Plague was on, it's like AI videos, or it's like, oh, you wake up in the 90s as a kid and stuff like that. So I think it's like I watch those and I'm like, the 90s ones are like, something that you've lived through. I'm like, oh, it was like that. Like that was so awesome, right?
No, I know every time I post about smelts, people are going to lose their minds because it's such a childhood East Coast thing.
It is.
But I mean, try to explain to my father, Dad, 1 million people saw your picture on Facebook. Like, you know, he's 80 years old. He's like, what? That's really cool. And so it's little stuff like that as an entrepreneur, I'm like, I love those stories and being able to have those moments, because I still try to explain to everyone in my life what I do for a living, and I still can't explain it half the time. But when you have things like that, to be like, 1 million people saw you cooking smelts, that's cool.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that's really cool. I love that.
And it's funny because Jason Galanda was in here just before. He did on TikTok. So I think he did it through Chores in New Brunswick, but he did the search for the best lobster roll.
I saw that.
And he's gotten like over 2 million views like across all of his videos. And he was explaining a story about one lady that has this shop in St. Stephen's that, like, it's this really cool backstory of like her dad being a fisherman, and then her husband's a lobster fisherman, and that like in the morning they like the lobster is fished, brought in, they cut everything up 4 a.m. till they open, they make the lobster roll. And he said like the backstory is really cool, but like they're just really good lobster rolls. And when he posted about it and explained the story and all that, like she sold out like within minutes on that day, and has been like super popular.
I know exactly which one you're talking about.
So wait, did that place win the best lobster roll? Or is it still going?
I think that's the one that he like said that was his favorite.
I think it was
like,
Spinney's in St. Martin's, wasn't it?
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually haven't had that one, and I'm like, I need to get there, but
the comment section is like, you know, there's battles between like, oh no, you have to try this one, or this one's better.
Well,
or whatnot. Like,
years ago on East Coast Mermaid, I did a roundup of fried clams articles. I didn't do one last summer, and then Jason did one. So I was like, I'm going to let Jason have the spotlight this summer, because the year that I did the fried clams, I remember Brian Gallant was premier. And because I was raving about Shay Leo, he had shared it, because he was like, Shay Leo's and riding and all that. I remember I was driving back from a concert in Boston, and my phone was just blowing up. And I had people attacking me because I didn't pick their favorite fried clams. I had people that were mad that I didn't know that you could ask for a homemade tartar sauce at one location. Like, I couldn't keep up with the comments. It was unreal. But so people get really excited about stuff like fried clams, lobster rolls, all of that.
Yeah, that's true. So kind of, I guess it's kind of not off topic, but on topic or whatever. I've asked this one time on another time, and I'm curious to see what, if I'm sure you remember, but what was your first job?
Oh gosh.
My first job was a sailing instructor at the Shediac Bay Sailing School, teaching little kids how to sail, and it was the best job in the world. No way. You were just on the water all day. Yep. You know, you have to keep kids alive out on the ocean, which is a tough job, but you're like hanging out with your friends.
You succeeded,
just
of course.
Sailing. Yeah,
Keeping all the kids
yes,
alive.
yes. Yeah, yes.
Pretty important.
But yeah, it was an awesome job. I loved it.
I worked at the movie theater at Crystal Palace. So I was worked in the box office, concessions, but that was, to be working at the movie theater in high school, it was just the coolest job, because you got to see movies for free. Every weekend you had to work every weekend, but like back then movie premieres were such a big deal. Like you know, the new Austin Powers movie would come out and everybody would be losing their minds. It was such a fun job,
on top of being at Crystal Palace,
and at Crystal Palace, and it was still Crystal Palace, which RIP Crystal Palace. I'm still sad that they took it away from us. Like you had the Starbucks in there and Crystal Palace, and it was just I practically lived there. Even when I wasn't working, you'd be hanging out at the movie theater and at Crystal Palace. So that was pretty cool.
The golden days. I had like a bunch of like smaller jobs, but I think my first like real girl job was I was a summer student at the City of Moncton in the events department. So we were 3 students that were hired every summer, and I did that for like four years. And we ran all the events in Moncton, so like the small ones, the large ones. So it was fun. Cool. Lots of long days and weekends, and I think that's kind of how I got used to just working all the time.
And which was kind of a segue into my next question is, do you think there was any takeaways from those first jobs? I guess for you, the workaholism, I guess you could call it.
Well, it's funny.
I don't know if that's a good thing.
It's funny you say that, because I worked at the movie theater, but that summer before university, I was also working for DFO because I was going to study marine biology. So I got a summer internship at DFO. So I was literally doing like 8 to 4:30 at DFO, going to the movie theater and then working at the movie theater until like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I was putting in super long days back then. And yeah, I think that just kind of created a drive in me that was like, I want to do all the things and I can sleep later. Yeah.
Yeah, same. I mean, even at the sailing school, like I ended up the manager. So I was like an 18-year-old managing a team of like 13 other, teenagers, and then 60 children that I was responsible for. So it was like kind of wild thinking back on it. Like who puts that kind of responsibility on an 18-year-old? But yeah, it kind of, that's why I'm a workaholic maybe.
Yeah, fair. It's always funny because I like looking back at my experience in like I started in retail, and I think a lot of the things that I didn't pick up at first when you go through that experience are a lot of the things that now have been really beneficial, and the jobs after that, like we're in the service industry, and I think it's like, the I'll say the in politically correct way, but like the tolerance of bullshit and shitty people, but like really it's just the, I guess, being indifferent in situations where there are people of specific personalities, and sometimes they have a good day and a bad day, but you have a responsibility to give them a great experience. And I think that's a skill that when you're going through it, you go back home and maybe you cried that night, or maybe you drank because of it, or whatnot, but it's like those experiences, the buildups of all of those things build you into someone that
it builds resilience.
and I think sometimes I like overlook going through that, and I'm like, that's why I can tolerate a lot of bullshit.
I waitressed all through university, and I think everyone should have to work in a restaurant at some point in their life, because the skills that you learn, they're insane. It's such a valuable work experience. Yeah.
Now, on another kind of part of the journeys through getting to where you're at, which I'm curious what your opinions on it is, whether it's post-secondary education or anything that you do that's not like forced education, I guess. Do you think that it has the merit that it has based on your experience, or do you think you would see it in a different way if you were to do it again? I'm curious to know.
I mean, I always say I always learn the most when I'm working,
Right.
and not when I'm in school. That being said, like I would not have been able to apply to the jobs I got without the degree, right? Which is kind of a shame, because I feel like all the skills I learned to be good at those jobs, I learned, not at school, but at work. So, I don't know how I feel about it anymore. Like looking back at my undergrad, I did poli-sci. I, learned how to write essays and cram for exams. Like I got really good at that, which kind of helped me in, politics. But other than that, I don't think I use anything from my undergrad anymore. But I use a lot from my MBA, like the accounting, the finance, all those core actual hard skills. I use them a lot in running my business. So that I think was definitely worth it for me.
I think it depends what, like a doctor still needs to go to school, but in marketing, it's so different, because when I was in school, we did not, I don't even recall having one social media class or like one digital marketing class. Like I learned all of that in the real world. But what I did learn is I was very much involved. I went to U Ottawa and I was very much involved. I was like the president of so many associations and organizations. So I learned how to manage my time and my schedule. And I always say that's the biggest lesson that I got. It was an expensive lesson to take, but that was the best lesson. And I think that's really what set me up for success after.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology with a minor in business. As I mentioned, I started out in marine biology. I did some internships at DFO, and I realized marine biology in Canada is not as sexy as movies in the 80s and 90s made it look like it was going to be. It's not turquoise water and jumping dolphins all the time. And I wish, so I took a year off after my second year of university, and I think if I were to go back, and any advice I would give to someone who isn't 100% sure what they want to do in life is to take that gap year, or not feel like you have to go right into university. Because I think if I had taken time to actually work and make money and understand how life works, I probably would have taken university more seriously in those first couple of years. I still don't regret it because I met all of my best friends at university, and the memories I made during my years in Halifax are some of my, core memories. But I really would be a strong fan of taking some time off to kind of have those life experiences, travel, figure out what you want to do, because that's how I got to where I am today. It was by living, not by what I learned at school.
Yeah, and I'm big on, like, through my experience, I'm big on what you just said there with taking just that gap year and being like, okay, like, go do a shitty job, or go figure out that, like, your mom and dad aren't gonna, like, keep feeding you and paying for your bills and all that, because at one point they might, but I think in most cases a lot of parents are like 18 years old, out of high school. It's like, okay, you got to start being an adult, right?
My second summer after university, I started waitressing. That was my first waitressing job. And I worked at a seafood restaurant in Moncton that had just opened, and they were having the most banger summer ever. I mean, the tips were insane. Yeah. So I just thought, come August, I'm not going to go back to school. This is great. I'm making all kinds of money. I can do what I want. Why am I going to go back to university? Yeah. And that kept up until Christmas, because then you had all the holiday parties and everything. And then January hit. And when I talk about everyone should work in a restaurant at some point, January in the service industry is
the worst.
It's the worst. Yeah. And I quickly realized, okay, wait, I do think I want to go back to school. But you have to have those being out on your own and experiencing what it's like to actually pay bills and all of that to really appreciate going back to school and really investing in what you want to learn.
How does one, like, and you touch upon it, and it's a really, I think it's an important part of not only the education, like, you need that, but it's also difficult, is like, how do you gain experience without having the opportunity to get experience? Because to get that experience, you need the experience before. Like, it's kind of like that little vicious circle. Like, how can people get a step ahead, even though they might right now being, maybe it's they haven't even had a job yet, or they haven't required a job and they're going into school, but then mom's not going to pay for the bills anymore and they need to find something, or alternatively, they have to go through all of their school, and then coming out of it, it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah. Somebody asked me this question last night, literally. I was on a panel with McGill students, and somebody asked this, like, it seems like all the entry-level jobs that I see on LinkedIn now, it's entry-level, but it still says, like, 3 years experience required. Like, how is that even possible? So I think, like, right now especially, it's just so unrealistic what the kind of experience that people expect you to have. But I think even, like, when you're in school, and like Monica said, get involved in things, right? It doesn't need to be a job, but it can be volunteer experience, or, like, work on your student society, or get involved in a sport at school. There are leadership roles in those kinds of areas, and you learn some really great skills in that kind of environment too. It doesn't have to be like a job that you're paid for. So it's about seeking out opportunities and really looking for them, and like making the most of it too, right? And then when you apply for that job, being able to communicate all the skills you learned in that volunteer job that will apply to this one. So
I was going to say, I think sometimes you need to take a job that's going to pay the bills and then get that experience. So for me, when I got back after university, I ended up in a job that, like, you wouldn't even believe me if I told you what I was doing. I was a responsible gambling counselor at the casino when it first opened, because I had a psychology degree. Yeah. I had worked on a responsible gambling campaign with a Toronto marketing agency for a year on the road, and I had lived and worked in Las Vegas. So I was like this unicorn. Where did you come from? You're bilingual. You have this university degree in psychology. You've worked in Vegas. You've done responsible gambling. But I didn't want to work in a casino. But it was a good paying job. I learned a lot. So I took that job, and then I started picking up freelance work. So I convinced friends that had businesses, let me help you with your social media. Let me help you with your marketing. Yeah. I started learning PR. I started just cold pitching and figuring it all out and self-teaching myself. So I didn't start out making money doing PR, but I got the experience while getting a paycheck from another company that helped pay the bills. Yeah. And then I got that experience to then be able to actually apply for jobs that got me doing what I was wanting to do. So sometimes in those early years, you might have to take a job that's not aligned with where you see yourself going, but you're still going to get valuable work experience regardless of what the job is. And that will pay the bills while you're able to learn the skills you need to do what you really want to do.
I would add to just be of value to someone else, just like provide value. And especially in marketing, if you can't market yourself, like how, like I need to see that. So like I've seen thousands of resumes in the last couple of years, and I just hired someone new this morning actually, and she got the position because she has no experience, which I don't care about experience. I can give you the skill set, I can teach you to do what we need to do. I care about character and just like how they are as humans, and also how can they market themselves. She had done a website for herself. You can do a quick website on any platform in today. She had a creative portfolio to show. It wasn't just a Word document resume, and she stood out. So like if you go the extra mile for yourself, someone will recognize it, and you might not need the 3 to 5 year experience for an entry level, but at least you'll have something extra.
Yeah, and I think like all of those things together, like one important thing to take away is like nobody's here to save you, and it's like it's all in your responsibility to, you know, bridge that gap between not having the experience or sacrificing a little bit of your spare time while you're working a job that you don't really want to do, but you're like you're putting that a little extra, and maybe you won't have a date night tonight, or you know, I have to be a little bit more tired tomorrow, or I have to stay up late at night, or on the other hand, like literally do the things that they're looking for, but do it on your own time, and do it in the way that you think an experienced person would do, because those skills are available outside of the education, and inside of the education they're not even available, right? So
And you can literally learn everything now with YouTube. So like there's no excuse.
yeah. One thing that I kind of end off each podcast, and it's I think is an important one, that we at the end of the day never know if all of the younger generation or the people at the crossroads or whatnot are going to be listening, but regardless, we try to give that advice. But you know, if you were to go back and to start everything off and to give yourself one piece of advice to the person that was starting off facing you in the mirror, what would that advice be?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one.
Wow.
Just one?
I mean, it could be part of the experience, or you know, we've had a lot of people, and you've touched upon it, and it's one that I really have taken, you know, as tried to put in place in my personal experience, is you need to go out there and take chances, and it doesn't matter what other people think. And I think that's one that like it can be for your personal life, it can be on your business life. Like I remember talking to Mathieu about doing new things in 2024, and we were like, we really need to do video and stuff like that, and the one difficult thing was who's going to be in it. And I would say, like, at the time, I'm not like, ça me gêne pas d'être en caméra, but like I'm not comfortable with it. And it's like I look back at that, and if I didn't take the chance, like, you know, I can still today, in a year's time from now, 5 years time from now, be better than the person that I am today. But if I never started, I wouldn't be where I'm at today, and that's doesn't happen without taking a chance, right?
That leans into a really good one, to like, you have to get uncomfortable to become comfortable again. And if you don't step out of your comfort zone, like, you won't grow as a business, as a professional, as a human. So it's really important that you put yourselves in situations that are uncomfortable so that you can continue to grow. And I think that I wish I would have told myself that earlier, and that would be a good piece of advice, because I was very shy as a young girl. So being outside of my comfort zone was like, I would have never imagined I would be doing marketing and all of this today. So I think that would be one piece of advice, is just to get uncomfortable more.
Yeah. And also, I mean, this kind of is what you were saying, but like, make decisions for yourself, and don't make decisions based on what you think other people would think is impressive, or
Yeah.
like what they expect of you. And it goes back to like the two people you need to be thinking about are
Yeah.
your younger self and your older self.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter like what your, well, to some extent it matters what your parents think,
Yeah.
but you know, in the end it's about what you do for yourself and not for other people.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I think to mirror that, it's just I would look into the mirror and say, you deserve to be at this table too. Because I think in the early days, you have a lot of imposter syndrome, and you think, what business do I have starting a business? But you deserve to start a business just like anyone else out there that's starting a business. And I think it takes a few years in business before you really stop caring what other people think. I think it's hard right out of the gate to not think about what others are saying about you, or, oh my gosh, I can't believe she started a business or she's doing that. But you'll get there. And I think it's just, you just have to get started and you have to make yourself uncomfortable, and it'll totally be worth it.
yeah, and the hard days are worth it.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
keep going through, because there are hard times when you
Yeah.
own your own business, you're an entrepreneur. Inevitably there will be difficult months, years, right? And it's just about just get through them and it'll be worth it.
It's probably much easier with a community like the Work Wives, I presume, and you know, incredible for you to start this, and kudos to both of you and the many women that joined this and benefit from it. You know, my takeaway from this is that you're only as strong as your community, and I see it through all of you. It's like the messages resonate and the enthusiasm is there, and I'm sure it's because of that, right? So
Rising tides float all boats.
there you go.
So just all have to come together.
Perfect. I appreciate all of you coming in. It was an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
Thank
thanks
you.
for having us.
This was fun.